WNST Tass in Baltimore and WNST.net. The Orioles off to a good start in the series against the world champion Kansas City Royals. They look a little bit like a shell of the former world champions. Luke Jones joining us here live via satellite. He was at Oriole Park at Camden Yards on Monday night, where someone, and I saw New Kids on the Block last week with the Backstreet Boys on video, someone had the right stuff. How about that, Luke? That's pretty good a segue from Mike Wright this morning, right?
Yeah, it was. And with Mike Wright, it was really a do-over. It was a mulligan, whatever you want to call it. Manny Machado said he was pitching with vengeance after briefly being sent to the minor leagues last week. Darren O'Day goes on the DL. He comes back a day later, never really went to AAA Norfolk. But because of the matchup, because of the Orioles using Vance Worley and T.J. McFarland over the weekend to take 2 of 3 from the Yankees, Mike Wright gets a second chance, and he takes full advantage. As you pointed out, it's not really a Royals lineup that's at full power, not even close. And as I pointed out, and Buck Showalter had kind of hinted around at this the last few days before he announced Wright as his starter, Kansas City's lineup is very right-handed heavy. And if you look at Mike Wright's splits this year, right-handers, he's done a solid job against. It's been the lefties that have just clobbered him this season. So 7 of 9 right-handed bats in that lineup for Kansas City on Monday, including Chesler Cuthbert and Whit Merrifield.
Who?
Right, exactly. I mean, guys that, names that sound like they were in the movie Major League.
Or Boogie Nights, for that matter.
Right,
yes.
But all kidding aside, Mike Wright did a nice job. Did a really exceptional job keeping the ball down in the strike zone, which is something that's really been a problem for him, getting the ball up. And unless you have absolutely electric stuff, and even then, you're up in the strike zone too much, more often than not in the American League, they're going to make you pay. But he does a nice job, goes 7 innings, just the one unearned run given up in the top of the 7th, and what do you know? Once again, the Orioles come back in the late innings. The bats come alive late, and they do it against another pretty good bullpen, although they finally got to Danny Duffy in that bottom of the 7th inning.
Give me a little primer on Wright and what they like about him, and make a case that he's going to stick around and be Chen or Gonzalez, that in 2018 or 19, he's actually going to be in this rotation because, Monday night aside, I have not seen the signs of life on him, maybe as much as we have on Wilson. And I would say, as far as a stuff type of thing, they probably like Wright stuff better than they like Wilson stuff, probably.
Well, it's not probably, they should. I mean, he has a much better fastball. I mean, he can that fastball on a good night, well, he'll sit in the mid-90s. Even on a not-so-great night for him, he'll still be hitting 92, 93, which is better than Tyler Wilson can do on his best day. So, with Mike Wright, I'm not convinced he's going to be in this rotation long term, but I do think he's a major league pitcher. I just think he's a little better suited for the bullpen. But if he's going to stick in the starting rotation, and right now you would assume he's going to get at least one more start in Toronto because, even with Yovani Gallardo set to come back after he makes his rehab start on Tuesday, Wright would still need to take a turn in the rotation unless you're going to go with McFarland or someone else. But with Wright, he's got the good fastball. I think his changeup is good enough. Slider is the pitch that he really needs to be able to work on and improve. Just isn't consistent enough yet with that. I continue to look at him, and I've said this to you since probably his 4th or 5th start last year. I look at him, and I continue to see Tommy Hunter, a guy who I think could be an effective middle reliever, maybe even a late-inning reliever at some point. But I'm skeptical that he has the kind of secondary stuff that you need to be a starting pitcher long-term. But that's why they like him because he's a big kid. He throws hard. He's got a decent changeup. But the big question is, can he develop his breaking pitches to a point where he's consistently able to get out left-handed hitters and just consistently able to get out hitters, period. So, this was a nice start for him, no doubt about it. I'm not sure. I'm not convinced that it's a breakthrough. I think you have to look at this lineup and look at Kansas City and the way they have struggled swinging the bats recently. I mean, they were woeful in Cleveland over the weekend.
It was kind of unbelievable, right? I mean, it was worse than the Orioles in Houston 2 weeks ago, but with the strikeouts aside. But, I mean, 0, 1, 1, 1. I mean,
right.
you can't win games when you're scoring 1 run.
Oh, no doubt. But at the same time, I mean, you just look at that lineup right now, beyond Lorenzo Cain and Hosmer, and, they still have Salvador Perez in there, although he's been banged up somewhat recently. But, I mean, they really miss Alex Gordon and Moustakas, and Kendrys Morales, who, was so good for them a year ago. He's been just terrible.
Yeah, the Morales thing, I talked to some Kansas City writers about that earlier in the week, and he was their best baseball player last year. I mean, DH aside, but, he was the biggest threat in their lineup, and he was one of the real reasons that they just ran away and hid last year.
Right. So, I mean, you just look at that lineup. There's not and look, as much as I just made fun of his name, Whit Merrifield's been a nice story for them. He's actually hit a lot since he's gotten this opportunity. But there's just not a whole lot in that lineup right now that scares you. I mean, Kane's a phenomenal player. We know that with offensively and defensively. Hosmer very much a really good player. Perez is a great catcher. But, I mean, there are too many holes in that lineup right now. And, again, I don't want to take anything away from Mike Wright because, his last few times out, he'd struggled so much. I don't think he even really considered the opponent. He just wasn't doing a good job, period. So you'll take this, but, before I'm ready to continue to pencil him in as a member of this rotation, I want to see how he responds when I would assume he'll get a start in Toronto over the weekend. That'll be a much better litmus test. Now, that's a very right-handed heavy lineup, too, so it actually should be a lineup that he can at least try to keep you in the game. But knowing what Toronto can do, especially in that ballpark, I think I'm much more intrigued to see how he fares there before I'm ready to call this start really a breakthrough for him.
Trumbo with a couple of hits and struggles with the bases loaded the other day. He's having a nice year, and I don't think it's going to go back into the hole where you maybe compare him to Chris Davis, and he was brought in to probably be Chris Davis before they were going to give Chris Davis the money. He's the one having the better year by a lot, and Chris Davis's numbers, if you would have switched them out and said, well, Trumbo's going to hit 213, he's going to hit 25 bombs, driving 80. I mean, that's kind of what you expected out of Trumbo. Certainly not this kind of production, and it's kind of ongoing. And I'm not a guy that believes when he comes up with the bases loaded that he's going to strike out, even though he did a couple of times. I know he's going to strike out a lot, but he's been a far better baseball player. He's earned himself some money this year. There's no doubt about that.
Oh, sure. And, I mean, anyone's going to strike out and have times where they don't come through. I mean, it was just, it was pronounced on Sunday because it was 2 straight times where...
And they still won in the end.
Right, exactly. But, I mean, he leads the major leagues with 19 home runs. It's amazing. He's 3 shy of his total from last season in 307 fewer plate appearances. I mean, this is... the best version of Mark Trumbo that we've seen in the major leagues. This is the guy who was hitting 30-plus bombs for the Angels earlier in his career, only he's been better overall with the bat. I mean, this guy hasn't been a high-average guy. He's been hitting right around 300 or better just about all season. And, I mean, he's had quality at bats. He's not going to draw a ton of walks, but I think for the most part, you've been really happy with his approach at the plate. I mean, he has an on-base percentage right around 350. He's slugging over 600. And as you mentioned, I mean, for a guy who was acquired to be an insurance policy for Chris Davis initially, and, they clearly had a use for him even after they were able to sign Davis in January. But it's, he's been a pleasant surprise. He's really, I mean, if you think about it, he became the replacement for Nelson Cruz that they never made last year. So it's been really, really nice to see.
Or Markakis, for that matter, from the year before, right? I mean, who they never really replaced, right?
Right. Well, I mean, he can't replace 2 people, but yeah, I mean, I guess with him playing a lot in right field, you can make that argument. Although defensively, his best position is DH.
Well, we know that, but
Right.
it hasn't been. It's been an adventure, but it hasn't cost the team. I mean,
Yeah,
I haven't looked up and
I'd
said,
say
"Wow."
there hasn't been that moment where it's cost them a ball game.
Well,
There have
fly
been
ball
some
hasn't become a double with 2 guys on and 2 outs that you would look back and say, "My God, we lost 6-4 because of him." You know.
Yeah. I mean, besides the fact that he's just not going to get to as many balls, and they've even had to shade Adam Jones to right center a little bit more than they'd like because of that. But I mean, he's made up with it for his hitting more than enough. He's been a pleasant surprise, and even just the timing of the game-tying home run. I mean, Danny Duffy was really impressive. He's a guy who has I don't know if I'd even say primarily, but he's frequently been a reliever for them. He's had some opportunities where he started in the past. Has good stuff. A really good changeup. He had really kept the Orioles at bay completely through the first 6 innings. They have the weird play where Scope tries to stop his throw, kind of mid-motion, hits off the runner. Kansas City scores the first run of the game, and you're thinking, oh, man, I mean, Mike Wright, who pitched so well, gives up an unearned run. He's probably not going to come back out there for the 8th inning, so you're thinking, oh, man, this kid could end up losing in a game that he pitched so well. And Trumbo comes up, and I think it was the 3rd pitch at the bottom of the 7th. Hits a home run into the bullpen to tie it up. I think that kind of opened the floodgates. And of course, Wieters 2 batters later hits one to dead center, just crushed one, and then Duffy was out of the game. But I think the timing of that was, it was clutch. As much as clutch, it's hard to quantify that a lot of times, and a lot of times it's kind of random from year to year for most players. That was a big moment, and it was nice to see them. Not just pick up Mike Wright, but pick up even Jonathan Scope, who, I know said he was trying to fake the throw to first to try to get the other runner off the bag. But I think that was more a case where probably a little bit too much bravado with the arm, knowing that Dyson was throwing there. But Orioles offense picks them up, and they get the 2 long balls. That Jones gets a double down the right field line for the 3rd run, and then Manny Machado puts a heck of a swing on a Herrera pitch for the Orioles' 4th run. So, it's been pretty amazing. I heard a stat after Monday night's game. The Orioles, 19 comeback wins on the season. Now, some of those, keep in mind, comebacks are still if you fall behind 2-0 in the 3rd inning or anything like that. But the Orioles lead the majors with their 19 comeback wins, and they've won 5 of their last 6. All 5 of those that come from behind variety. So this team, really fun to watch, and we've said it all year long. If their pitching just leaves them in the game at the very least, more often than not, they're going to have a great chance to come back, and we've certainly seen that a whole lot over the last week.
Wieters with the home run, Luke. He's having a better year than I think we could have thought, and it's come on. Maybe it didn't happen early in April. I mean, he's sitting close to 300 again, and this would be his best season if he could sort of hang out at this level. And I know we're all playing on the day-to-day. We all like to have the $15 million one-year deal, right, Luke? But in his case, he has not been a disappointment this year.
Well, it's been really good to see. I mean, for $15.8 million, you were hoping to see the old version of Matt Wieters, a little bit better version of Matt Wieters than we've seen many years. And I mean, maybe not walking quite as much as he has at other points in his career, but it's hard to argue with the results. I mean, the one thing that I'll say, and I've loudly been a Caleb Joseph guy, as far as going back to the qualifying offer situation, and saying that Caleb Joseph could give them production close to what Matt Wieters could do for a fraction of the cost. That said, it's really tough to find plus offensive catchers who also give you good defense behind the plate. Now, he's not a perfect catcher behind the plate defensively, maybe not what he was a few years back, but that's a tough combination to find. Normally, you're going to find all defense, no offense, or you're going to find a guy who will put the gear on and be back there behind the plate, and he'll hit a few home runs and be good offensively, but not going to contribute a whole lot from a defensive standpoint. So, Wieters has been huge for them. He's especially been big really over the entire month of May and now into June. He's been Mr. Clutch, and I asked him, as I did after Sunday's game, when he gave me the answer that catchers get tired and they're ready to go home. It wasn't quite tired and ready to go home in the seventh inning, but another late game situation in which Matt Wieters comes through. He's been huge for them, especially as you mentioned Davis a few minutes ago. With some of their other guys maybe not being at full go as far as what they can do offensively, Wieters has really been able to pick up this lineup, that's for sure.
And Machado now on some sort of pace to hit 40 home runs, right? It's kind of gotten to be crazy that he's become the power hitter that, we'd heard about back when he was a kid. I thought, through the major leagues, he'll be a guy that hits 20, 22, 25 home runs. He might have 20 by the All-Star break, man.
Yeah, and I think, when we talked about this throughout the offseason, we talked about this really during spring training. And my question, it wasn't that I expected this to happen, but my question was, is there another level after what he did last year? Keep in mind, he finished fourth in the MVP voting last year. I mean, he had a phenomenal season offensively last year. We know he served in the leadoff spot when the Orioles really had no one else who could do that. But he hit 35 home runs. He had an 861 OPS, played terrific defense at third. And keep in mind, he's doing this offensively while also playing shortstop for the first time in a few years. And look, I get it. I think everyone realized, assumed, predicted that he would at least be a solid to good defensive shortstop, understanding that it is a very different position from third because it is a much more range. And we knew Manny had exceptional, elite, once-in-a-generation kind of range at third base, perhaps. But Nolan Arenado, maybe not once in a generation because he's that good in the National League defensively. But we've seen him play really, really well at shortstop to the point where, the Orioles haven't missed J.J. Hardy at shortstop as much as they've really missed Manny Machado at third base because they've had the issues at third with either having defensive guys like Flaherty or Giannis and not getting enough offense, or they've had to stick Pedro Alvarez there, who's a defensive liability. But Manny has more than handled shortstop, and it's been incredible to see his offensive progression. I mean, he's been better than he was last year offensively, and that's saying a lot because when I wrote that prior to the season, asking, is there another step? Is there another level to that whatever the ceiling is for Manny Machado, is that there? If he was only as great as what he was last year, that's still a phenomenal player. But he's entered that territory where you need to put him right there with the Trouts and the Harpers as the absolute best of the best in the major leagues. He should be in that conversation.
Yeah, I had three people say he's the best player in baseball. And, once you start hearing that 2-3 months into a season and you look up and see the numbers and the positional switch and the leadership and where the team is and his age and given the injury history, it's a pretty good story right now. I mean, Manny Machado will be a big deal at the All-Star game. I have a feeling.
Yeah, well, he should be. And as far as where he ranks, I think Mike Trout is the guy who's done this for 4 years now. And this is the same argument you make for Trout over Bryce Harper, who a lot of people, including me, at a couple different points over the last couple years have said might be the best player in baseball. So, but at the very least, Manny's right there. He's right there. He should be in that conversation with those guys if you're going to be talking about the best player in the game. And especially with the fact that he's been able to play shortstop at the level he has. If he can play that kind of defensive shortstop, then you kind of have to. That's the position that's kind of the standard. And I realize Trout plays a lot of center, plays center field, which is another position where you don't always get that kind of offense. But Machado has been. We've said this for 3 or 4 years. To say he's really, really fun to watch at this point, well, he has been really since the point that he came up, but he is just an absolute force. And while his home run in the bottom of the eighth in Monday night's game wasn't the biggest run of the game for the Orioles, it was still nice to give Zach Britton a little bit more cushion. And you go into the ninth inning with him on the mound and a 3-run lead. That's about as much of a lock as you can get with a closer situation.
Luke Jones on the scene at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. He's been subjected to all sorts of rain delays, lightning delays, bad baseball delays, pitching delays, and now will be subjected to an evening of Ubaldo Jimenez and Yordano Ventura. You know, the two guys with all the promise in the world going head-to-head. It could be two no-hitters. It could be a 4-hour and 20-minute ugly bloodbath where everybody goes to the bullpen in the third inning, right?
It really could be, and as much as we've talked about Ubaldo Jimenez, I mean, we know the struggles have been immense. They've been extreme. On the flip side, you look at Yordano Ventura, who you're kind of expecting him to come into his own as one of the best pitchers in the entire league, and he's got an ERA approaching 5. Not as bad as Jimenez, I want to point that out, but hasn't been very good. And for a Kansas City team right now that is really struggling to score runs, you would think they're looking for him to put up a special performance. I mean, they got a good start from Danny Duffy on Monday night, but with these two guys, though, you're right. Wouldn't be shocked to see maybe an unlikely pitcher's duel based on how they've both fared so far in 2016. But well,
the Royals can't hit, dude. So if Jimenez is ever going to come to life, this should be his time, right, against this lineup.
You would think so. But I mean, the thing with Ubaldo, I mean, it hasn't been that he's always been clobbered with the bats. It's been more putting guys on base, and then some opportune hits here or there that the opposition just makes him pay big time. So, is he throwing strike one? Is he getting ahead of hitters? Is he not putting guys on base via the walk? If he is able to do those things, then against this lineup that's really lacking some firepower, I give him a chance to have some good success. But if he's going to walk hitters at the rate that he has for the better part of the season, then probably be another long night and one of those dentist chair variety starts that I don't want to say I like to talk about because I don't. But it is what it is with Ubaldo at this point. It'd be interesting to see how he fares. And as I said, Yovani Gallardo making what the Orioles think and hope will be his final rehab start Tuesday afternoon. We'll see how he comes out of that, and very well could see him back in the rotation as early as this weekend in Toronto.
All right, we will be out at Ravens camp all day when the Ravens allow us to be. And, of course, at Oriole Park all night will be Luke Jones, Yordano Ventura, and Ubaldo Jimenez as the Orioles have 2 more games at home before they fly off north of the border to take on the Blue Jays and get back to the American League East. Anything you missed, you can find in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device. Download the TuneIn Radio app. We come in crystal clear anywhere you are. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports. Thanks, man.
All right, man.
We will. I'll see you a little later on. I'll be out there with you.
All right, sounds good.
You got it. See you.
All right, see ya.